I'm going to begin dealing now with three angels messages that have been presented by the Seventh-day Adventist organization through the years. What many modern Seventh-day Adventist members do not realize is today they are hearing the second three angels message, not the first three angels message. But yet when they go into their churches, they're not being told that there were actually two three angels message, and the one they're hearing today was nothing more than an invention to cover for the mistakes of the first three angel message that failed in the 1840s. Do you think you're going to really walk into a church and hear your minister or one of your leaders say, okay, today I'm going to be preaching the three angel message from Revelations chapter 14. But before I get into that, let me tell you this is actually the second three angels messages, because the first one failed. It involved date setting. It would show our spirit of prophecy to be nothing more than a false prophet. So we can't go and tell you that. So what we're going to do is start preaching the second three angel message as though that's what we've preached all along. And that is total fabrication. This is not true. Now then, what you see here is the failed prophetic chart of William Miller, and that was endorsed by Ellen White. Now then, you remember from my past videos where Ellen White had made the statement, I saw that God's hand was in this, and she said that all the figures were right and everything was right about this chart, except that God's hand covered a mistake. And I've shown in one of my videos about that. What was the mistake that God's hand had hidden? It was the date. It should have been 1844 and not 1843. But everything else about this chart Ellen White agreed with, as did the early pioneers. And this chart the only thing this chart had to do was with the world coming to an end. It had nothing to do with the present three angel message of investigative judgment or the present three angels message about the Sabbath being the seal of God or the mark of the beast. And why do I know that? First of all, this chart had nothing to do with investigative judgment, because investigative judgment did not begin being taught until 1857, when when James White and Ellen White bought into it. Second thing is, I said it had nothing to do with the Sabbath. It had nothing to do with the Sabbath for this reason. This chart in 1844, Ellen White was not a Sabbatarian at that time. In fact, she told Joseph Bates and others too, why should I place any more importance on one commandment than I should the other nine? And this is when Joseph Bates was trying to talk her into being a Sabbatarian, and she made that statement, why should I pay any more attention to one than I should the other nine? And finally she bought into it and became a Sabbatarian, but it was not until 1846, 2 years after this chart had failed. This chart and the three angels message here was the first angel message. The everlasting gospel had been preached. God was coming back for judgment, and that's what it was about. The gospel had been preached to the world, even though at that time it hadn't, and that God was coming back to destroy both sin and sinners. In other words, the world was getting ready to end. The second angel's message here had to do with Babylon was fallen, had to do with, at that time, according to them, apostate Protestants who was rejecting this failed prophetic message. They didn't include Catholics in that then, because according to them, Catholics had been fallen for years, so they just called this Babylon is fallen as referring to the apostate Protestants. And why were they apostates? Because they were rejecting the false message on this chart. And because they rejected this date setting, they now became apostate Protestants. And this chart failed. On every aspect of it, it failed. The second message from the angel was Babylon is fallen. The third angel message there had to do with the rejection of the everlasting gospel. It had nothing to do with the Sabbath. It had nothing to do with investigative judgment that is taught by the present three angel message within the Seventh-day Adventist organization today. Seventh-day Adventist, you owe it to yourself to find out the truth about this. You don't have to believe me about it. This material I'm talking about is coming right from her writings, right from the writings of the Seventh-day Adventist, through the Review and Herald, through Present Truth that was written back in the 1800s. This material is coming right from your people. You can find it just as easily as I've found it and discovered it. You owe it to yourself to ask your pastors, to ask your leaders, why are you preaching a different message than our pioneers preached? Why did you change the three angels' message? And if you changed it to the day where we're hearing the second three angels' message, why haven't you told us the truth about the first three angels' message? This has caused turmoil and dissension and division within the Seventh-day Adventist organization. You owe it to yourself to check with it. You owe it to yourself to check with your leaders. You owe it to yourself to check within your own writings and find out what you're hearing today in the three angel message is nothing more than an invention to cover for the mistakes of a false prophetess during the 1840s and early 1850s. And that's what it is, an invention to cover for Ellen White. This is your own writing, Seventh-day Adventist. It's not mine. This comes from the mouth, so to speak, of your own leaders, not mine. I'll get into the second three angels message in my next video and show you the things that were invented to cover for the failed prophecies and the date settings by Ellen White in the first three angels message. Until then, this has been Godly Saying. God bless.